the three of them. These are stalwarts in the space. And so I really want to take a moment to introduce them with more than just 2 lines, because they've done the caliber of work that they've done shows us why they are panelists and discussing such an issue as this. So I'll start with Brother Jonas. As we all know him, the director of the Institute for Social Transformation at Tangaza University. I always say, if you don't know Brother Jonas, you don't know anyone in the space. He's a critical educator and social entrepreneur with over 2 decades of experience in higher education across Malawi, Zambia, and Kenya. His academic work focuses on unlocking university students' potential to become social innovators, and he's really committed to mentoring the next generation of leaders, fostering social innovation and creating lasting impact across Africa and beyond. He's founded a number of initiatives. I won't go into all of them, but one of the more sort of famous convenings, the annual Africa Conference on Social Transformation. That's a Pan-African convening of social entrepreneurs. He's founded Tangaza Social Innovation Sandbox, and a co-founder of Social Innovation Summit in the DRC and Social Enterprise Kenya as well, which is a national network. So welcome, Brother Jonas. I'm very happy to have you joining us. I'll go across to the other side of the continent. Edwin Zukujo is the Executive Director of Social Enterprise Ghana, an NGO business network of social enterprises across the country of Ghana, hugely inspiring the work that he does with a social farm company. He's also a project management professional with more than 15 years of experience in business development, trade promotion, and impact leadership. He's also project managing a massive MasterCard Foundation funded project training 80,000 young people across the country in vocational and entrepreneurship skills in agricultural and adjacent trade areas. Thank you so much, Edwin, for taking the time to join us. And then we'll go to Danson Gishini, who is almost a de facto Africa Forward staff member these days, because he works very closely with us. He's an international development professional who's worked across several global organizations, including the International Organization for Migration, Save the Children International, and Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship, as well as the World Economic Forum, where he currently is. He's supporting government, civil society, and the private sector to co-create solutions for addressing complex global challenges. Currently, Danson serves as the Africa lead for social innovation and entrepreneurship at WEF, where he works to scale social entrepreneurship and innovation as drivers of systemic and sustainable change across the continent. Welcome, Danson. So I often say that people see policy as this really boring topic, very bureaucratic, messy, theoretical. It's something that's done on the macro level, and either you're in it or you really don't want to be. It's not something that practitioners often think they have time for. And it's just often because policy stays there at policy and doesn't manifest into practice. And we've started to elevate the social economy into policy statements, continental strategies, and various resolutions. I was just at a CCW panel discussion earlier where we were speaking about policy from an international, regional, and local level, and how many systemic fractures there are as to why policy is not becoming practice. A handful of African countries have dedicated SSE or social enterprise legislation. South Africa has a draft national social economy green paper, which we are trying to revive. It's just hit some bottlenecks for a few years, trying to revive that. Kenya, Ghana, we will hear from. Uganda, Tunisia, Senegal, Morocco, each also have pockets of policy activity. And even Mauritania even has an advisor for the social economy. But somehow, formal legal definitions, enterprise categories, reporting standards, tax treatments, all of these pathways remain inconsistent. And, and although we have the AU 10-year strategy on the social and solidarity economy, that's yet to be operationalized into binding national commitments. So we really need to figure out, where policy does exist, why it is not translating into practice, and where it doesn't exist, what needs to be done to ensure that that actually comes into being. Why is there not a realization of its significance? Policy may feel complicated, but it's one of the most powerful drivers of long-term progress in Africa, and it shapes opportunity, it unlocks financing, new markets, and it creates an environment where social enterprises can thrive. So, with all that being said, that is the background and the context as to why this is an important discussion. And I'm going to dive right into bringing our panelists into this discussion and to, to give us a bit of a sense, perhaps initially, Edwin and Brother Jonas, as to what is the policy landscape, the situation in your country or region look like right now? Just to kind of give us a bit of a sense of the context, and so we can locate this discussion. What does it look like, and perhaps what are you doing as part of your work to intervene in that policy landscape? So perhaps I can start with you, Edwin, in Ghana, and then we can come to Brother Jonas.
Thank you so much, Yuki, and it's always a delight to share this platform with you and my other colleagues, Jonas Danson, and to our other participants here. The policy landscape is quite critical. In emerging economies and developing economies like ours in Ghana, the question has always been, is there a need for a policy? And if there is a need, what will be its usefulness? We currently have a few policies. We have an MSME and entrepreneurship policy. We have other policies that are targeting specific MSMEs, like a fintech policy and strategy here in Ghana. And also, even with emerging trends like AI, we have an AI policy. So governments across the continent are adopting and developing policies, but we don't have one for social enterprises, social and solidarity economy businesses operations. And the question has always been why. And for us, we have always talked about the fact that maybe we have not done a lot of work in making policymakers and government agencies understand and have the buy-in for the need for a policy. In the last recent report that we did, and also to say thank you so much, Danson, and your great team, we are yet to publish that report, but it tells a huge lot of story about the great work that social enterprises and solidarity and social economy businesses operations are contributing to economic development in the African continent. Here in Ghana, in our last report, we said we have close to 200,000 social enterprises across Ghana. And these social enterprises are creating close to 1 million job opportunities for young people and are contributing about $2 billion annually to Ghana's GDP. Now, is that not a good enough platform for us to say there is a need for a policy or regulatory framework that governs the work of this constituency or category of operations? And so for over the last 6 years, we have been working with the Ministry of Trade and Industry of Ghana and the Ministry of Finance to see the need for such a policy. And I would say that has been a long journey over this period. For us as business networks and associations supporting social enterprises, It always gives us that opportunity to engage policymakers, government agencies, but it's always that continuous engagement because in the continent and in our country, a lot of people don't see the value, the buy-in, and of course, what is the contribution of social enterprises to the bottom line of a continent, of a country. I'll say that that's the South story that we find ourselves in, and the need for us to continuously not lose hope, but to see value in continuous engagement of all policymakers is where the direction of focus needs to be. This will be my initial reflections.
Yeah. Thank you, Edwin. And perhaps just to pick up on this before we go to Brother Jonas, there was a social enterprise policy paper that was developed in Ghana. And it would be interesting to know where did that go then? Like, is that similar to South Africa, where it's hit, some bottlenecks and sort of territorial disputes and in different government departments and almost become stagnant? Is that the case, or is there another reason that didn't go any further?
Yes, so the first document, the drought policy, was developed back in 2019. And in 2023, we went back to that document again, engaged policymakers, stakeholders across the country to rework on the document. So as we speak now, this is a document that is still with the Ministry of Trade and Industry and also requires a lot of legwork because that is where the energy gets exhausted because policy work is not a one-day event. It's a lot of process, it's a lot of engagement, it's a lot of dialogue and sensitization because as we speak, policymakers don't appreciate the context. They don't understand what exactly we are talking about. Like for instance, AI is new. They don't understand, they don't buy in. So for them to come out with a policy for AI is because they see value and the need for a policy of that nature. So for me, I see that we have the draft document, and thanks to partners like, as I mentioned, Dancing and the World Economic Forum, such reports, such sensitization is what keeps the government thinking and going back to the drawing board to see what are these guys talking about? Is it useful for a contest? Is it something that they can adopt? Can they experiment that? Can they pilot that? And if they do, will that contribute something meaningful to the economy, to the country? These are questions that, as we speak, I think we have not been able to convince government agencies to say that there is value in this social enterprise economy.
Yeah. So interesting. And I think when we chat with Danson is to bring in the importance of data in answering that. But Brother Jonas, give us a sense of your context as well in East Africa.
Thank you, Yogi. I hope you can hear me very well.
Yes, perfectly.
I'm smiling when Edwin is saying that policy work is hard and it's a long journey. Definitely, I want to pick from there. I think that's the experience. When you see, especially I want to talk about policy on social entrepreneurship, it's a tough journey and sometimes it's quite discouraging for the social entrepreneur. Sometimes it looks like the social entrepreneur are talking to themselves, okay, and they don't know how to find the right way to really get their voice heard by those who will support the policy around that. Okay, so in Kenya, that has been the concern. There has been a concern about policy for the work, the amazing work, to support the amazing work that the social entrepreneurs are doing. And I remember 6 years ago, after one of our conference, it was strongly felt that now the actors needs to come together and start this journey around policy. So then some actors came together. There was Ashoka, Tangaza, other actors. And then there was a working group to push with the support from British Council then to push for policy. And as it's hard, at one point, the whole thing stalled. And here I want to make an observation. And to do this work, you need also leadership. It requires real leadership, commitment and leadership. Okay, so that was the first phase, and then it stopped there. Then other initiatives picked up. Social enterprise Kenya, for instance, picked it up to say, okay, now let's try to start pushing for at least start creating awareness that we need this. So we start engaging some actors who will help understand what kind of policy do we need? Is that actually necessary? Some question around that. How will this be useful for the social entrepreneurs? And that was done. So that was that step that was done. Very important step that also we took here was to engage some lawmakers. Especially we have, for us, it's also good, we have some lawmakers who are social entrepreneurs to start engaging them to say, okay, how do you think in this context, the legislators can start creating awareness about the work of social entrepreneurs are doing and the need for policy. So basically, that is the struggle we're in. I will say that we're in that struggle, in that journey, and it's not to be discouraged, but it's going to require a lot of leadership for this policy to take shape. And you will see also in the region, let me expand a little bit beyond Kenya to talk about, for instance, the experience of Ethiopia. I think Ethiopia is also one of those countries where you have the social entrepreneur well organized and then who have kind of pushed. I think they are at the stage where now probably there is a kind of recognition for the work that the social entrepreneurs are doing, So that's another very interesting learning, from how they money. I think each country has its own trajectory, the journey, in terms of bringing government to accept, recognize the work that the social entrepreneurs are doing. If you look at the experience of DRC, for instance, is the ministry itself, the Ministry of Micro and Small Enterprise, that felt the need that there is a certain form of enterprises that are different from, the business enterprise. So the ministry commissioned somebody to do research and a lawyer to kind of write the policy. Okay, so as they are doing that, they embedded, the social innovation entrepreneurship policy in the in their document, which is also very interesting. The approach that they use is, and then the challenge now is to popularize it and then to make it that this law is there, it has been passed. Now it's basically people to make use of it. Okay, so I jumped from Kenya and B to also see that yes, as we are struggling, there are some learning experiences we can learn from. There are some positive experiences we can learn from, but we should not get discouraged. We should sit down and ask ourselves, how do we continue this journey? How do we push for it? How do we advocate for policy around social entrepreneurship, considering the importance of social entrepreneurship for our countries, for this continent?
Yeah. I mean, I find like there's a few key things that are coming up. It's this like abstractness around the social economy. So in order to be able to understand it and to convince policy makers about it, you need data, so we need to kind of almost concretize this sector more for people to understand it. You're talking about leadership and we also spoke about the time that it takes to get this done, which means you can't have support on a short-term basis. You need partners in this whole policy advocacy process that are able to stay for the long haul, because it takes time. And then I noticed just a comment in the chat about consultation as well with those on the ground, so policy can't be like removed. So Danson, I mean, with the World Economic Forum, it's this massive like machinery known for sort of like private sector, big company support. Just try and help us bridge then your involvement with the social economy and why policy is an area of importance for WEF, and why you chose to do this research in mapping out the social enterprise ecosystem.
Thank you, Yogi. Thank you, panelists, Edwin, Jonas. Can you hear me okay? Great, and thank you to everyone who's engaged, colleagues on this call. It's a pleasure to join this discussion with my colleagues, and I would even say friends. We've worked a lot together on this report. on social enterprise in Africa together. And yeah, I'm Danson Gishini. I work at the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship at the World Economic Forum. And we are a foundation that awards, leading world-class social entrepreneurs all over the world. And I cover the Africa and the MENA regions. But being African, I have to say I have somewhat of a bias in my work portfolio. So it's a pleasure to be here today with you. And as you know, to answer your question, Yoki, why are we interested in policy? One thing to note is that actually the World Economic Forum doesn't have a policy mandate. I'm based in Geneva, and we have other international organizations here in Geneva that have a policy mandate, whereby member states of the UN, for example, will contribute, and there will be a charter and a mandate through which that specific UN agency would advise governments on how to implement policy. And we don't have that at the World Economic Forum, because we're not a UN organization. But we bring together business and government. That is what we do. We convene business and government, we produce knowledge and insights, and we also raise awareness on many different topics. And so it's a very powerful platform. And while we don't do policy implementation, I would say that strategically what we do is agenda setting. We can set the agenda. And so we work a lot with UN agencies who are implementing policy, who are working locally with governments, advising technically. But we are a convener. That's what we do. And so our work definitely influences policy, but we don't implement. So I wanted to mention that. And so within the work that we do, we've been collecting this data on social enterprise in Africa, because as we were doing convenings, as we were bringing together our stakeholders, people want to know, is there any evidence to what you're saying, or are you just passionate about social enterprise? And actually, the amount of data in social enterprise globally has been very, fragmented. It's a lot of data that's there is not recent. And last year we had done a global mapping study on the state of social enterprise, and we brought together data from 80 countries. And we estimated that there are 10 million social enterprises generating 2 trillion in annual revenue globally, with 1 in 2 led by women. And so, this report was great in agenda setting. We were able to bring together, all of this data from 80 different countries. But at the same time, there was a lot of interest to look at Africa specifically, because there were nuances globally, and people want to understand how is this taking place in Africa. And so that's what my work has been. It's been over the last year working with Yogi, Africa Forward, Luvuyo, Edwin, Jonas, other social enterprise networks, the African Union Commission, and other partners to really try to map on a regional level what's happening on the social enterprise landscape in Africa, so that if we are to design policies, to convene and have discussions, they can be based on evidence, on research, and to understand what is going on.
Yeah, thanks, Danson. I mean, I think we can see that there are these gaps that we're mentioning, right? But where there are frameworks, like, for example, the African Union's social and solidarity economy strategy, so there's the 10-year strategy, and then there are national attempts at frameworks, and there are certain national frameworks or green papers in place. So what specifically is breaking in the translation from policy ambition to on-the-ground action? So where there are, policy efforts in place, what is the bottleneck that we're not talking about? What is it that we need to unlock? And so, yes, we could, yes, we're saying we need to bring in the data, we need leadership, and it's not just one thing. But I'm wondering if there is some kind of bottleneck that we're kind of skirting around, and that we almost need to tackle first as a sector. Brother Jonas, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we now with that we start having the data, because data was one of the issue, because you need data to convince. Now we start having the data. What's the next thing that the other bottleneck that we need to look at is the people at the table. Are we bringing the right people at the table? Because policy work is cross-sectoral, if I put it that way. And then if you are bringing people together, you need government to be there. You need people who really believe in the work the social entrepreneurs are doing, are able to kind of, push for it. So bringing the people who really have to be at the table. Sometimes you can be among, entrepreneurs, but you are listening to each other. Are we bringing the maybe private sector who might put resources, and the government and all that? So I think that's the second thing that we need to look at. And the issue of resources, it's also extremely important. And I think also from the experience I share, some of the challenges was really resource related, and you cannot continue that work because it also require convening and all those kind of things without resources. So who brings the resources? It's something also we need to see. Definitely. Those are the
sorry. I think that there are two provocations for us in that. One is, are we the obstacle in that inclusion piece? So as we being the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the advocates for the policy, are we really inclusive? Are we doing the consulting? Are we bringing the right people to the table and ensuring the right voices are heard? So that's the one thing. And then secondly, who's funding this? So you've got the people who are trying to advocate for policy, but that requires resources, and funding is perhaps just one of them. But policy is not seen as a sexy area to fund, and so it's like, how is this work being supported? Edwin, perhaps some thoughts from your experience as well on your side.
Yeah, for us, is always looking at it from that entrepreneurial ecosystem development. That yes, policy is important, but do we wait for policy before we support and unlock the opportunities that are there for social entrepreneurs and social enterprises? The earlier remarks that you talked about, the impact on refugee community and people that are forcibly displaced, that we have a community of social enterprises working in those communities and addressing their challenges. And even with or without policy work, they are doing a lot of impact work that needs to be supported. The statistics around women entrepreneurs in the social enterprise economy is huge, 50%. Do we need to wait for policy before we direct support to those communities? When you look in the Ghanaian context, the persons with disabilities in the social enterprise ecosystem, the young people below the age of 35 in the social enterprise. So the challenge is that we cannot put policy ahead of developing an entrepreneurial ecosystem that has to be supported. And that support requires, yes, of course, we talk about data, the evidence. We are also talking about even what is a social enterprise, that definition. Then, of course, the best practices are learning from the best of the best. What is Ireland doing? What are the guys in South Korea doing? That we can pick a few lessons from there and start implementing in our context. Things around certification. I mean, we don't need a policy to, at least in our network, certify based on our own internal definitions who are social enterprises and start identifying and certifying them. I think that we can do. From our own end, can we start putting together some funds? For us, we have started initiatives like the Ghana Social Enterprise Fund that we are targeting women social entrepreneurs in the green sector. So smaller funds of that nature are quite very important in start getting some social enterprises and demonstrating traction from their end that yes, it is good and viable investing in social enterprises. From our context, can we start looking for some companies that we are working with to say, can you invest in social enterprises? Can you even procure some percentage of your goods and services from social enterprises? So these are things that I feel that in the absence of policy, these are initiatives, small actions. In our context, it's quite difficult without resources. But without resources, what can we do on ourselves to move the conversation a lot more useful to policymakers and investors? Because if they see viable tractions and usefulness and test cases, that is when government will say that on your own, you have been able to demonstrate viability. So I see value in partnering with you to do this and that. In our conversation, we also talked about even the continental level, where we are saying that the African Union is coming with or has even developed a strategy in the social and solidarity economy. How have we on our own engaged the African Union to say that it is possible for us to tap into that strategy? And can you develop it on national context level? So even though they may not have a policy, they all have a strategy. And that is an easy buy-in for local governments, for countries, rather than a policy. But there's a strategy direction. So I would say that, yes, can we start with some small works instead of big talks? Can we start some small viable actions? We are supporting few, it could be 100 social enterprises in our countries to say, yes, we've been able to support this, and this is the impact they have created. And government, if you have a policy framework, if you have a legislation that is supporting this community, then they can do this much. For me, this would be my context and thinking in that respect.
Yes. I mean, I think that's really interesting. Is they like almost make it so difficult for government to not see the impact of these initiatives that they would want to step in on. Danson, I think Edwin and Jonas have moved us into the solutions orientation that we definitely want to be in. What are your thoughts about what needs to be unlocked as somebody who has that sort of intermediary and overview of the sector? What are some of the things you think needs to be unlocked to take us further?
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Really great reflections and so many ideas coming to mind. But so I think there are two parts to this, and I would like to just repeat what Edwin said. The first part is being pragmatic and what can be done now, because policy work it takes a long time. You know, if we can meet for 20 years until we have a legal policy framework recognizing social entrepreneurs, but we have to be pragmatic for getting stuff done. So with the research that we did, one of the things that we were trying to do is to just understand, before we jump to saying we need a policy framework, what's happening? How are social entrepreneurs leveraging the frameworks that they already, the frameworks that they already have? Are they registering as nonprofits? Are they registering as for-profits? And we saw that, there is for those who are legally registered, we saw that there's a majority who are registering as for-profits. And there are also some nonprofits who engage in trading activities. But also looking at the fact that in Africa, majority of businesses are informal. And so they also have a role to play when it comes to social enterprise. So we were trying to look at how are they registering and leveraging what is available to them when it comes to legal and policy frameworks. And I think what we need to do is to have these discussions about how can they design their models with this. I've spoken with social entrepreneurs who say that I have a for-profit entity which is owned by by two nonprofit entities, and I structure my organization across these different entities and my governance frameworks to ensure that I can generate profit from my for-profit arm. I can receive grants from my nonprofit arm, but the money I receive from my for-profit arm is reinvested back into the nonprofit arm, which does our mission and impact-oriented work. To lock in our mission and to help us to generate revenues that help us to sustain what we do. There are so many different hybrid models that people are leveraging to try to advance a social cause through a business. And I think we actually need to do a good job of having these kind of debates and case studies and looking at how do we leverage the current, what is available to us right now in the most innovative way so we can generate revenue and sustain impact. That is the first thing that I think needs to be done. And we need case studies because there is no, or a playbook that people can look at and say, oh, I'm a social entrepreneur, and this is what I can do to register myself. Then the other thing, for the more long-term conversation on how to really have like dedicated legal policy framework, I wanted to share, the report is being launched on the 17th of November, but I did want to share what we observed like across the continent when it comes to this issue of policy and legal frameworks, because I think there are different how do I say, there are different trade-offs that come when it comes to you know, the different ways in which policy is being implemented when it comes to social enterprise. So I'll try to be super quick. So the first thing is we looked at, there are countries that have national SSE laws and strategies. These are countries like Cabo Verde, Cameroon, Djibouti, Mali, Morocco, Tunisia, and Senegal. They have a dedicated framework which looks at SSE policy. So they group social enterprises within the broader SSE, that's cooperatives, mutuals, associations. And usually these types of policies are sitting within a Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. So they focus on things like decent work, social protection, social affairs and stuff. But these ministries are not necessarily focusing so much on enterprise development, innovation, access to markets, procurement, these areas that social enterprises are core to helping them do what they do. So the social enterprises can get lost in that broader framing of SSE. And I think that the social enterprise sector needs to think about, you know, how do we engage? Do we engage with ministries of labor on SSE policy? Or do we engage with other ministries like ministries of trade and industry, which focus maybe not so much on the decent work and social protection, but they focus on enterprise development? So like Edwin's example is one in Ghana that you worked on that draft policy with the Department for Trade and Industry. And the same in South Africa, that where you are from, Yogi, that the green paper on social economy was developed with the Department for Trade, Industry, and Competition. And I think there's a discussion to be had there of where does social enterprise sit within governments? And should it be something which is standalone? Should it be something within the broader SSE framing? Should it be a topic which is cross-cutting, that brings together the Ministry of Labor and SSE, that brings together the Department for Trade, that engages departments of science and innovation? Is it departments of small business? There are many, the thing with social enterprise, it sits in the middle of everything. All right, so where should be the political levers and pressure points that the social enterprise sector should engage with government? And I think that's a conversation that the data will help to have, but also the sector needs to come up with a strategy for where it fits specifically within government. So yeah, just a few points.
Sure. Yeah, those are some really interesting thoughts there, because you know, and I have so many questions, but I was just thinking where it sits actually determines the lens in which it, you know, it's like tackled or addressed by government, right? And it's great, yes, if it's job creation, etc., but that might be only one lens into it, and you want it to be broader than that. And I know many social innovators with hybrid models where they're having to do gymnastics around, trying to, manage the governance, the reporting for all these different types of structures. And so having that independent legal identity and unit that looks at social enterprises might be an interesting thought to pursue. So I do have loads of questions, but I'm going to open it up to our audience who have been listening very intently, and thank you for adding here and there to the chat as well. Any thoughts, Amanda, straight off the bat, please, let's hear from you.
Awesome session, guys. Hello from Hermanus in South Africa in the Western Cape.
My favorite place.
I love it. I love it. I love it. You can probably tell from the accent I wasn't born here. So born between Manchester and Liverpool, moved to South Africa for the love of South Africa almost 20 years ago. And very interestingly, we were in the healthcare business. So wound care was our speciality. And I think when you come from that kind of background, you can start to see the bigger picture of the country that you're moving to. And so very, very initially from the beginning, there was the thought between setting up our business with a heavy social impact that actually balanced our commercial impact, if that made sense. So we sold wound care dressings on one side, but we took care of the woundedness of our team and our country in parallel. And rather than putting the commercial into the social, we pushed the social into the commercial. We backed it in from that regard. And I think that eases things up a little bit on the governance side, because it's not as if you're not expected to be an unashamedly successful commercial company. It's what you do with your profits that really makes the difference. So actually from DTIC, I got a motivation letter for my permanent residence based off the significance of the business model, if that makes sense, the national importance, but it's never gone anywhere. So we've actually, aside from us promoting it, the fact that we put reconciliation in our business model, we salary matched on gender, race, and also everything within the first 5 years. We created jobs with our profits. We impacted communities with our training. It's not actually, I have suggested to DTIC, why don't you turn these things into an aspirational and inspirational competition instead of a very stodgy box ticking policy? Because the policy almost takes the creativity out of the solution, if that makes sense. And it's not astrophysics. You come from the north, you come to South Africa, you can immediately see what the challenges are. And if you're a heart-led business, and we quadrupled from a commercial income perspective in 10 years. So we were commercially successful, but we were more socially impactfully successful by backing the social into the commercial, if that makes sense. And we stole John Lewis's partnership model from the UK. So I don't know if you all know the John Lewis department stores and Waitrose, initially a social experiment in social class reconciliation. And if you think about it, reconciliation is something that South Africa has never really tackled. So we took a social class reconciliation model and we turned it into a race, a gender, and a social class model, if that makes sense. So I think there are some beautiful models out there, but our policy is very dampening. It doesn't really push you to get out of bed in the morning and and say, you know what, I've got a mad, crazy idea and I think this might make a difference. I do feel that by backing the social into the commercial, you can be amazingly commercially successful and your customers actually love you more because of what you are doing with your profits. that actually they can see they're not going into the back pockets of directors. We only ever had internal shareholders. So John Lewis's business model, 100% of the ordinary shareholding is in trust for the employees. So it was really for us about trying to persuade SARS to please adopt John Lewis's business model. The legislation is all there. They've only got to copy paste, if that makes sense. But making, as well as making transformation aspirational and inspirational, it's making social impact aspirational and inspirational as well, for not just social entrepreneurs, but commercial businesses, that they can actually see their commercial business will do better and be more sustainable if they integrate social impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really interesting. Lots of sparks flying up in my brain. I just thought I haven't really heard creativity and policy in the same sentence. Normally, policy is very like kind of stayed. And someone once said to me, in the word policy is policing. And generally how everybody looks at policy is regulation. It's like, how can I limit you? How can I make sure you're not doing something, versus how can I make sure you are doing something? And that, and so that creativity in policy is really interesting. I'm wondering, Edwin and Jonas, if this sparks any thoughts for you in terms of, your context at home, and bringing that creativity into solutions, backing, and as well as backing the social into the commercial. Jonas, go ahead.
Yeah. Before I answer that, I just want to kind of build on something that Danson and Edwin said, which I think are extremely important. As much as policy is extremely important, we need to work towards that, and then we'll discuss what kind of policy. I think the social entrepreneur cannot just sit and for a policy to help them. Okay, as we need to be doing more work. For me, the first thing is building a strong ecosystem. I think if social entrepreneurs are fragmented, each one is doing his own things, you are not together. You don't have an ecosystem. It's going to be difficult, really, to kind of push for recognition for the work that you do. So working around ecosystem, then research. It's great that there is this research that has been done, but we need more case studies, as Danson say, stories that convince people really that social entrepreneurs are contributing to solve the problem in our society. They are contributing to create jobs. They are contributing to solve conflicts and all that. So I think we need more of those case studies. And then also the role that each actors can play to say, okay, the academia, what do they do? Social entrepreneur and network, what do they do? So kind of allocate that. I think that's very important in terms of working, creating the ground for policy to come, to support the work. And then what in the question you ask, the creativity in the policy, I think there is one concern. As much as we talk about policy, there is one concern. Is policy going to constrain social entrepreneurs? Are they going to limit them? And how do you go about that? I think that was very hot in one of the awareness creation sessions that we have. And they said, no, maybe we don't need it. If we have a policy now, we are going to be controlled and all that. But it also depends on how the policy is developed, and the voices that feed into the development of that policy. If it's top down, then I think there is some realities will be kind of forgotten. So we need to look at also the approach that's used to develop those policy. Is it informed by now the reality on the ground? And entrepreneurs are constantly going to innovate. And is that going to be taken into account by whatever policy will be developed?
Thank you so much. Before I go to Dr. Wamuyu, Edwin, is there anything you wanted to add to that comment?
No, just two things. In the current context, we have no other way than to be creative and innovate. Because in the absence of a policy is a non-creative area, because we are saying that for us to improve the well-being and support to social enterprises, then there is a need for an alternative. And the alternative is the creativity that we are saying that we are moving from the traditional and normal way to a much more collaborative and impactful way, which is a policy that regulates, governs, and promotes. You see, policies do not only regulate, they are supposed to promote new ways of doing things, new ways of creativity, of innovation. We call ourselves social innovators. So it's not just around the absence of creativity, it's about innovation. These are what social entrepreneurs are noted for. And in our context, it's quite difficult to even do business. So you have no other way than to be creative. And now we are saying we are serving underserved markets. We are producing products and services for underserved markets and the last miles. So you have no other option than to be creative. And the guys we work with are the most innovative, creative people that we work with. And the policy dimension, that's the second point, is about innovation. And if we engage the people at the bottom of the pyramid who are daily struggling and coming out with innovative ways to survive, that is when innovation and creative and the new ideas, the light bulbs, we match for us to draft policies, documents, strategies to support that community. So for me, that would be my
Thank you.
remarks.
Creativity is our hustle, right, in Africa. Thank you. Dr. Wamuyu.
Thank you so much, Yogi, and I want to start by thanking the panel. That was a very lively discussion that I enjoyed thoroughly, especially since I understand the challenges around policy and what it means for us as social innovators as we try to do our thing. And having been in this space for many years, I'm beginning to look at it from another angle. Even as we push for policy, which we must, I'm thinking that, and I've been talking about this, that we need to build our strategy. And I call this strategy the glue strategy. I don't know whether you're hearing about it, because I've been talking about it loudly. And I'm calling it the glue up strategy because I'm saying we as social innovators are the glue that brings the government, private sector, and development partners together. So to be able to push for policy, we need to show our value. And therefore I won't talk about the four-step strategy now because it wasn't part of what was being discussed today. But the first step is claim our recognition. We say, we are here, we are important, you need us. Point 2, we need to align with what's happening in government and other spaces. Point 3, we need to create value so that people see why we are saying we want a policy, because they can see they need us and we need them. There's reason for this. And then, of course, be in forums like this where we advocate and amplify our work. So this four-step strategy, glue up strategy, in my view, supports us in ensuring that governments understand our value, and therefore when we lobby for policy, it becomes a little easier for us. So anyway, that was just a conclusion, and I agree with all the discussions that have come across, that we are the innovators, that we need to have a strong ecosystem, and that we need to show our value as social innovators. Thank you so much, Yogi, for facilitating this.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that's really brought it together very nicely. Like, the way that's articulated is the claiming our recognition and our value is really about like that data helps back that up. And we've been talking about data and evidence and aligning with the various stakeholders. So kind of positioning ourselves in the middle of that, creating value, as you said. I just want to, I know we are out of time. I just wanted to check if there was anyone else sitting with any question or comment they wanted to make before we close. I think we could go on talking about this for a while, but maybe if there's anything anyone sitting with that they'd like to throw into the conversation. And no questions for our panelists? No? Everyone's sitting with like a lot of thoughts that have come out of this. Thank you so much for joining. I think it's safe for us to say this is a good point at which to close. There's been so many thoughts that have come up. I don't know if in the last sort of minute, Dr. Wamuyo, if you could just tell us those four again. So it's the claim our recognition.
Yes.
Aligning with the
Align
government
with the
and
national
other
and global
stakeholders.
framework. Whatever is happening,
Oh,
align
right.
with what is
Right.
happening. Show our solutions, as we do that. Then point number 3 is co-create value with other people. So let's not sit there and bang our chests and say we have solutions. Let's co-create, because by doing so with private sector, governments, and so on, then we're in a better place. Then the fourth one is advocate and amplify, so that our value can be seen out there. So I'll avail this strategy because it's just growing horns now. So I'll be sharing it.
No, it just nicely brings our conversation to an end, because it helps summarize the things that our panelists have been talking about as well. I know we're over time, so thank you all for staying on and for joining us in this conversation. And I wish you well for the rest of your day, and enjoy the rest of the session that Catalyzing Change Week brings. And thank you, Edwin, Danson, and Brother Jonas, for your time in this discussion. Thank you, everybody.
And we look forward to reading more about the report that Danson has put together. I look forward to
we have put together.
Yeah.
We have put together. Yes, right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.